You're certainly aware by now that, well, we live in strange days and we need to practice social distancing. So, for example, I canceled all of my game nights and you should consider cancel yours. Which means that in the next weeks or months or for however long the emergency lasts, I'm gonna review games mainly that I'm going to play with my family. So family games, especially games that I play with my daughters who are 7 and 9, and also solitaire games or games with a solitaire option. When it comes to war games, that's pretty easy because many war games can be played solitaire. Some are already designed as solitaire. They're not soloable, they're just solitaire. And for other games, well, I'll figure it out. Also, I'm gonna put a particular emphasis on print and play games because those are games that you don't have to get out of the house to buy them. You can just magically summon them in your house and be safe. In this review, I'm going to talk about Pickett's Chart, which is in fact a solitaire war game. It is published by White Dog Games, and you can order a professionally produced copy from them, or you can do like I did, which is I bought the file from their website and then I built my own print and play copy. Warning, my print and play productions are particularly utilitarian. I know some of you like to make their games in a way that look very fancy. I'm just happy that I can play my games. So don't worry if my copy doesn't look as great as yours will. In Pickett's Charge, you control the forces of the Union on that momentous day in which they're attempting to cross this area here, and they're trying to climb on Cemetery Ridge, and they're going to be mowed down by enemy rifle fire and artillery as they do so. So it's a solitaire game. You control the forces of the Confederates, and the system, the AI, controls the Union forces. What you see here is the setup. This is what the board looks like at setup, with the Confederate units placed here. Most Confederate infantry units are under an inactive marker, and we'll see how you remove those, and the other guys are just there. One thing, however, that is also good about print and play is that, of course, I can make notes on the map without any guilt. I can make annotations for things that are important to me. In particular, there isn't a turn anatomy in the rulebook. I mean, there isn't the rulebook, but not in a playwright, so I just wrote it there on the map. Units can be artillery or infantry. They have a number of strength points there. The art tells you what kind of unit that is. We only have artillery and infantry in this game. The red number there is used for setup purposes, and units have a number of steps. Say, when this unit takes a hit, it's flipped to its other side, which is the reduced step. It takes another hit, it is removed with artillery. This artillery unit has 2 steps. Many infantry units have more than 2 steps. That's why they're represented by 2 separate counters. Say Armistead starts at 5, takes a hit, goes down to 4. When takes another hit, when at 4, you should remove this counter and bring in the corresponding one with level 3, with 3 strength points, takes another hit, goes down to 1, takes another hit. And so just to make sure that you don't misplace, and what I like to do is I already place the matching counters for infantry units, one on top of the other. So when on the board you see a stack of 2 infantry, at setup, in truth, those are simply 2 different levels of cohesion of the same unit. Now, the game starts with a Confederate bombardment. There's a special phase in which first you get to use your artillery units to try to weaken the Union line. It's probably going to be largely ineffective, doesn't do much. What it does, however, it exhausts your artillery, because after the phase in which you get that free artillery phase, you roll a die for each artillery unit, and there's a chance that your artillery unit will either be reduced in the process or will become inactive, in which case you simply put a corresponding marker on it. That is something that happens only the first turn, then you start the main game. The turn structure for the main game is, first you need to check for the activation of your units. The game only uses 6-sided dice. For each unit that still has an inactive marker, you roll a die. You roll a 4, 5, or 6, the unit becomes active and you remove the marker. 1, 2, or 3, nothing happens and you cannot activate that unit for the time being. Too bad. Next you have Confederate movement, which is what you imagine. Units will move up to their full movement allowance, which is not much. Infantry moves by 2, artillery moves by only 1 hex per turn, and also it can only start moving in turn 3, and that's why I made a little note there. So your Confederate units will move because remember, your job is to get up there. So the burden of the attack of moving against the enemies is on you. Kemper, what are you doing, Kemper? There you go. The 2 Kemper units were fighting against themselves. That's pretty much it. Since the artillery units only move by 1 per turn, then there are several terrains in which they cannot go. And here you have a player aid on one of the pages telling you about terrain effects for movement and also for combat. Some types of terrain will give you defense, will give you a save roll. They may allow you to try to avoid a hit that otherwise would be scored against you. So each regular turn, first we check which Confederate units activate, then we move Confederate units, then the Union moves, and the Union moves only starting from turn 3. You may have noticed that from the little note that I showed you earlier. Union, turn 3, that's very important, it's easy to miss. The Union units, if they are within a short range from Confederate units, they roll a die, and depending on the result, they may move 1 hex closer, trying to narrow the distance with the Confederate units. So after the Union moves, then you have Union fire. Fire works as such. Suppose that this is the situation. All Union units that can fire will fire against Confederate units. You will roll for each firing unit a number of dice equal to its strength. So in that case there would be 3, for example, 3, or would be 3, 5, and so on and so forth. You look at this combat table. Here we go. Look at this combat table. You look at the column indicating who is firing, say infantry. You'll cross-reference with the range to the target, and that tells you which are the numbers that would hit. So that is this. So 2 only results of 5 and on artillery, or results of 6 for infantry would hit. If it's artillery, 5 or 6. You see how I wrote a little R there? That's a reminder, again, that is not there, it's only in the text, that not all hits are born equal. Yes, if you roll a number in this range, you score a hit, but 6s do not cause step losses, they only cause the target unit to retreat. It's 5s and 4s that cause losses of steps. That means that infantry can actually reduce enemy units only when rolling 5s at an adjacent distance, when adjacent to the enemy. Hotzlet's guns are a special unit. They are up there in that corner. They have a range of 6 to 10. It's just a special unit, and it just keeps pouring fire against our poor Confederate soldiers. This is for combat, really. You apply retreats and hits, with the exception of if the unit that receives a hit is in certain types of terrain, say for example Stonewall, then for each hit that you would take, you roll a die and you cancel that hit on a 5 or 6. After you have taken some punishment from the Union, then finally you get to fire, which is the Confederate phase, and Confederate fire works exactly as Union fire, exactly following the procedure that I showed you. So this is the general idea. In the first turn you had the special phase with artillery, and then artillery firing and your artillery potentially being reduced, and then each main turn is roll to see who removes the inactive marker. Confederate movement, Union fire, Confederate fire. Continue like this for 8 turns, and at that point the number of strength points that you have that are up there on Cemetery Ridge will determine your level of success. So Pickett's Charge is basically a beer and pretzel game. And I don't even know why I use that expression because I don't like pretzels all that much. Unless they are filled with peanut butter, then it's good. But still, it's a game that it's light. It's very light. If you are stuffing your face with pretzels and drinking beer, unless you're doing keg stands, you can also play the game at the same time. It doesn't distract you. One thing will not distract you from the other. It's very simple, it's very light, and yet it has a couple of interesting elements there. My fear was that the script was gonna be very similar from one game to the other, and it is, but not to the point that it becomes a deal breaker, because you have enough randomness when it comes to the activations that sometimes you will want to push from one flank, sometimes of the other. Well, you had to deal with what activates. And I had games in which people took forever to activate, then it was a mad rush and not much happened there. So there's variety there. You can try to exploit the terrain in different ways, and the fact that it's as easy to push the enemy back as it is to reduce them, to make them lose steps, again also creates variety, because sometimes you will have the Union line moved back and you jump on the cemetery ridge before they come back. Other times you manage to create a break, you manage to breach their line, especially if you come from the right side of the board. There is a real possibility there. But it's the Husley's guns that are showering you with death and destruction. But then again, sometimes you breach that line and then you try to expand that gap, you surround them, you force them to retreat where you are, and that counts as capturing the enemies. So there are just different things that will happen. Not fantastically different, the script will not change all that much, but for a game that is so minimalistic, that captures such an interesting theme, and you can play in about an hour, that's fine. You'll play 2-3 times in an evening and you'll see different variations of the same battle, and I think that may just be fine. The investment of time that you have in learning the rules is not going to be much. This is a game that definitely a beginner wargamer could play. For a seasoned wargamer, there's still enough. There's still enough there to be entertained. Again, as a filler wargamer, as not as an epic experience, but with an interesting back and forth, with some interesting decisions. With solitaire games, sometimes the problem is that you feel that the AI takes too long. I'm 5 minutes performing actions for the AI, and then I take 2 moves, and then again I do stuff for the AIs. That's a problem sometimes that I have sometimes with the State of Siege games, which I like in general, but there isn't always a balance between what you do and what the AI does. Here, pretty much you and the AI take equal turns. You roll a bit more for them because you need to determine if they move, whereas you know where you want to move. But there is a balance there, so you do feel that you're doing stuff and you're concentrating fire, etc., etc., etc. Figuring out which parts of the line to push, how to deal with the fact that you're pushed back, and so on and so forth. So, Pickett's Charge, very simple, mind you, a beer, peanut butter filled pretzel, and an IPA kind of game, but within the category, pretty fun. Pretty enjoyable. My copy also wasn't all that expensive, but again, then I also bought the file and made my own copy. If you prefer a professionally available copy, they are available on the website of the publisher. So here we are. Pickett's Charge. Simple, light, but entertaining, and, well, fun. It captures the theme well. Definitely enjoyable.